Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and in the recent patch update, DICE made some changes to the G36C. They made it so that it had less recoil, it's much more accurate because they wanted to make it so that it was a more viable weapon in the battlefield. And that's good. Like, the G36C before this patch, I would say, is abysmal. Like, it was probably one of the worst weapons in the game. It had a low rate of fire, it did not have the accuracy to back up that rate of fire, and so there was just really no reason to use this weapon. But what they didn't tell us is that they basically transferred the stats of the M16A3 from Battlefield 3 and put them into the G36C. Like, the other day, I was running around with this weapon and I was destroying people. I have not had this much fun in Battlefield 4 in a very long time. Like, the G36C, I don't want to say it's the new God gun, but it is easily one of the most powerful weapons in the game right now. Like, the M16A3 back in Battlefield 3 was easily one of the most powerful weapons in the game. It didn't matter if you were playing at the start of Battlefield 3 or at the very end when we were all waiting for Battlefield 4. If you were using that weapon, you were easily using one of the most powerful weapons in the game. Like, it was flat out amazing. And so I was very surprised to see that they basically transferred all of the stats of that quote-unquote god weapon and then put them into an all-kit weapon, which is the G36C. I would have assumed that they would have done this more for something like an assault rifle, because the assault rifles are supposed to be the best classes in the game. They're supposed to be top tier. But nope, they decided to give this to all of the classes, spread the love, and so basically, if you want to use one of the best weapons in the game, it doesn't matter what class you're playing on. And so, if you've never played Battlefield 3, or it's been a very long time since you played the game, and you can't remember how awesome the M16A3 was, it was basically the weapon that you would use in every single type of combat scenario, and the stats completely backed it up. It didn't matter if you're playing up close, it didn't matter if your target was at medium to long range, you had the stats and the weapon that was going to dominate basically everyone. Its recoil pattern was easily one of the best in the game. Like, it was extremely predictable. It had a vertical recoil of 0.26, a left kick of 0.1, and a right of 0.4. That right of 0.4 does sound quite substantial, but because its left kick is so low, it's basically non-existent, you know exactly where this thing is going to bounce when you start to hold down the trigger. Like, it's going to go up and then to the right. And so an experienced M16A3 player could compensate for that recoil very easily, and so it didn't matter if they were up close, it didn't matter if they were at long range, as long as you played around with the M16A3 for a while and you started to understand the recoil, because it was so predictable, you could destroy people in every single type of circumstance. The other thing it had going for it is that it had one of the best RPMs in the game. It had a rounds per minute of 800. And basically what this meant is that if you were trying to go for someone who was up close and personal, and they were using, let's say, an AEK or a FAMAS, one of the high RPM weapons in the game, you had the RPM to go toe-to-toe with them. But at the same time, it wasn't so high that you would struggle at a distance. Like, 800 rounds per minute is quite high, but at the same time, because you have a predictable recoil pattern, along with a very manageable RPM, you could still do very well at long-range combat. And if all of that wasn't enough, it also has one of the fastest reload speeds in the game. Like, it basically is over in a flash. It has a short reload time of 1.8 seconds, which is just ridiculous. Like, that's just absurd. And then a long reload time of only 2.37 seconds. If you use the M16A3, you never felt like you were out of the action. Like, you round the corner, you see a couple of enemies, you take a couple out, but there's still a couple more left. You can duck behind cover, go through just a 2-second reload animation or less than 2-second animation, and then be right back in the action. You never felt like you were at a disadvantage, or you never felt like you had your pants down using this weapon because the reload speed was so short. If you use something like the FAMAS or the AEK, which were some of the best close encounter weapons in the game, if you went through the long reload animation, it would almost take you 4 seconds, like 3.9 seconds for the FAMAS. Like, that was going to mean the difference between life and death all the time with that weapon. Like, you had to be sure that you could go through that reload animation. But with the M16A3, while it does have slightly less rounds per minute and all of these other amazing attributes, it only took you like 2 seconds to go through the long reload animation. Like, it was simply incredible. And then for the final stat, its damage, it also had the same damage model of all of the other assault rifles. Like, you would think with all these other amazing stats that they would reduce it in some other aspect, but no, it still does 25 damage a shot up close and then drops off to 18.4 at long long range. And so hopefully it is very apparent why this weapon was so popular and powerful back in Battlefield 3, and why I'm so puzzled to see that they basically transferred all of the stats from that amazing God gun and put it into the G36C. There are some slight variations here and there. The damage is slightly reduced because this is a carbine, so it's going to do slightly less damage than the assault rifles at long range, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that it is just incredible at this point. Like, I was playing some squad deathmatch for the first time in a very, very long time, slapped on the G36C, and went on a rampage. Like, I couldn't tell if it was just because my enemies had no idea what was going on. I couldn't tell if I was just getting lucky or if I was in the zone. But then I transferred on over to other maps, played on other game modes, and I was having the same success with the G36C. And so, I don't know if this is a bug at this point. I don't know if DICE was just like, screw it, we're gonna make the G36C one of the best weapons in the game because everyone was complaining about its low rounds per minute. I'm not exactly sure at this point, but what I do know is that it is so much fun to use right now. If you loved using the M16A3 back in the day, that was your favorite weapon, which it probably was because everyone used it, you're gonna have an absolute blast with the new and improved G36C. The one thing I am worried about though is that because once again this is an all-kit weapon, like every single class can use it, my worry is that every single player in the game is going to use the G36C. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, the M16A3 was so powerful back in the day, and now that every single class, recon, support, engineer, and assault, can have this bad boy at their disposal, my worry is that weapon diversity will plummet. We'll just have to wait and see. Maybe DICE will nerf it here in the near future. Maybe it was just a bug or a mistake. But at this point, go out there, have fun with this gun. You're gonna have an absolute blast, especially if you have nostalgia from Battlefield 3. It feels exactly the same, and it is an absolute blast. But that is about it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think so far of the changes to the G36C. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Are you a little worried like me that this is going to completely ruin weapon diversity in the game? Let me know down below. But until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.